stop for a moment. I want you to forget the flashing lights. I want you to silence the noise of the paparazzi shouting her name. We think we know her. We think we own her story because we consumed her life in fragments. The silhouette in the royal carriage, the face on the magazine cover, the tear-stained eyes looking up
Look
from a
here.
car window.
Your
We
Highness,
memorized the
look
public
this
glamour
way.
and the public tragedies.
Oh my God,
But a
did
life
you
isn't
see
lived
them?
in the headlines.
More
It isn't lived
pictures.
on a balcony waving to a crowd. A life is lived in the quiet. It happens in the stillness of a bedroom at 3 in the morning. It happens in the echo of a long, empty hallway, or the solitude of a walled garden where no camera can see. To truly understand Diana Spencer, not the icon but the woman, we have to look away from the podiums. We have to open the heavy doors and walk into the spaces she actually called home. Park House, Althorp, Highgrove, Kensington Palace, 4 addresses, 4 distinct chapters of a life cut short. These weren't just buildings made of brick and mortar. They were the crucibles that forged her spirit. They were her sanctuaries, her prisons, her classrooms, and finally, the places where she found her liberation. This is not a story about royalty. This is a story about a woman searching for a place to simply belong, told through the walls that witnessed it all. Her story doesn't begin in a palace. It begins in the shadow of one. If you were to go back to Norfolk in the early 1960s, you would find a large Victorian property called Park House. It sits right on the Royal Sandringham estate. It was a home of immense privilege, certainly, grand and imposing, surrounded by ancient trees, but it was rented. And in a way, that is the perfect metaphor for Diana's early years. She was close to the center of power, literally hearing the royals through the hedge next door, but she was always just on the periphery, looking in. She was born there in the winter of 1961. Her world was defined by the harsh, biting Norfolk winds and the rustle of the leaves. Inside those Victorian walls, the blueprint of her character was drawn. On the surface, it was a childhood of swimming pools and Shetland ponies, of warm summers and scraped knees. It was the picture of English aristocracy. But houses have memories. They absorb the energy of the people living in them, and Park House absorbed a lot of pain. And Diana would later refer to this place as the Silent House. It was the stage for the defining trauma of her life, the slow, agonizing collapse of her parents' marriage. Those thick walls heard the shouting matches, the slamming doors, and the stifled crying of her mother, Frances. There is a specific image that haunts the history of this property. Picture Diana, just 6 years old, sitting on the cold stone doorstep of Park House. She was waiting for her mother to come back. She sat there for hours, watching the gravel driveway. But the car never turned in. That doorstep, that physical threshold, it became the boundary line of her abandonment. The house, which should have been a cocoon of safety, transformed into a place of deep, aching longing. Yet, we can't dismiss Park House as just a place of sadness. It was also a classroom. It was within those rooms that Diana learned the art of empathy. As a child of divorce, she learned to read the temperature of a room instantly, a survival skill that she would later use on the world stage to connect with millions. She learned early on that a home is fragile. She learned that security isn't guaranteed by a title, or a butler, or a big house. When the Spencers finally moved out, Diana didn't just leave a building. She left the only version of normalcy she would ever know. The scene shifts in 1975. Her grandfather dies. Her father becomes the 8th Earl Spencer. And suddenly, the teenage Diana becomes Lady Diana. The family packs up and moves to the seat of their power, Althorp House. Now, if Park House was a home, Althorp was a museum. Imagine being a teenager, already grappling with loneliness, and moving into a place with 90 rooms. Althorp is grand, yes. It is breathtakingly beautiful, but it is not designed for comfort. It is designed to impress. It is a house where the furniture looks too valuable to sit on. The hallways are lined with black and white checkered marble that echoes with every step you take. You can almost hear the footsteps of 500 years of ancestors walking with you. For a young, sensitive girl, Althorp was cold. It was intimidating. This house didn't hug you. It demanded that you straighten your spine. It demanded that you live up to the oil paintings staring down from the walls. For Diana, this was a training ground. The sheer scale of Althorp prepared her for the theatricality of royal life that was to come. It taught her how to be small in a massive space. It taught her how to walk under the gaze of history without tripping. But it was also a battleground. This is where she faced the wicked stepmother figure, Rain Spencer. The domestic wars fought in the drawing rooms of Althorp sharpened Diana's will. We often think of her in those early years as the shy, blushing kindergarten teacher, but Althorp bred a specific kind of toughness in her. You couldn't survive a house like that without a backbone, and yet she never truly felt at home there. She treated Althorp like a transit station, a waiting room for a destiny she couldn't quite see yet. There is a haunting irony to that estate. The place she struggled to connect with in life would eventually become her eternal home. The island on the oval lake was waiting for her. But before the tragedy, there was the fairy tale. Or at least, and what she thought was a fairy tale. When she married the prince in 1981, the world expected them to live in a castle. We expected turrets and moats. Instead, they moved to a country manor, Highgrove House in Gloucestershire. This was Prince Charles's domain. It was his pride, his joy, his architectural soul. He had spent years cultivating the gardens, talking to the plants, laying the hedges. And for Diana, newlywed and barely 20, Highgrove was supposed to be the nest. It was supposed to be where the happy ending began. But a house cannot serve two masters, especially not two masters with such opposing visions of the world. Highgrove became the physical manifestation of their incompatibility. Charles loved the earth, the traditional, the quiet rhythm of the soil. Diana was a creature of the city. She craved noise, she craved company, she craved spontaneity. She tried to make her mark on the house. She hired interior designers, fighting to bring brightness and youth into the manor. She covered the gloom of the heavy antiques with fresh fabrics, pastel chintz, and vibrant colors. It was a territorial struggle, fought with upholstery and paint swatches. She was trying to paint over the cracks in the marriage. The only thing that saved Highgrove for her was the nursery. That room became her fortress. Behind that door, away from the cameras, away from the courtiers, and away from the tension, she could be silly. She could be tactile. She could be a mother. The gardens, meticulously curated by Charles, became the backdrop for water balloon fights and police and robbers with William and Harry. But when the sun went down, the silence of the countryside became deafening. The geography of Highgrove worked against her. It was isolated, miles from her friends in London, and it was haunted by a ghost that lived just down the road, Camilla Parker Bowles. Diana later described the atmosphere at Highgrove as oppressive. She felt like a prisoner in the open countryside. The house that was supposed to be a retreat became a pressure cooker for her depression and for her bulimia. She spoke of the walls feeling like they were closing in on her. Every weekend spent there was a stark, physical reminder of what was missing: love, connection, partnership. By the early 90s, Highgrove wasn't a home anymore. It was a theater of war where the actors were just waiting for the curtain to fall. The curtain fell in 1992, the separation. She left the silence of the countryside and retreated to the noise of the city. She moved full-time into Kensington Palace, apartments 8 and 9. Now, historically, Kensington Palace was known as the Ant Heap, a place where minor royals were tucked away to live out their days in quiet obscurity. But Diana, she turned it into the headquarters of a revolution. If Highgrove was Charles's, Kensington Palace was unequivocally hers. Once she was alone, she purged the apartment. Out went the heavy mahogany. Out went the gloomy oil paintings and the stiff royal traditions. In came the light. In came the space. She filled the rooms with the scent of fresh lilies. She created a sanctuary that finally reflected who she was: independent, modern, and free. This was a working home. Picture her at her desk in the sitting room, surrounded by framed photos of her sons. to penning the speeches that would change the global conversation on AIDS, on landmines, on homelessness. It was here that she found her purpose. It was a strange existence, though. A palace is a fortress designed to keep people out, yet she was more accessible than ever. She would drive her own car out of those black gates. She would go for a jog in the park, nodding to tourists. She was the Princess of Wales. But here, she was just a Londoner. The apartment witnessed the complexity of her life in those final years. It saw her secret romances, the flickering hope of new love. It saw the strategic planning for that explosive panorama interview that shook the monarchy to its core. And it saw the quiet nights, the most famous woman in the world, eating dinner on a tray while watching soap operas, just like anyone else. It was a blend of the extraordinary and the mundane.
One picture, please.
Kensington Palace was where she finally grew into her own skin. No longer the shy girl from Park House, no longer the intruder at Highgrove. Here, she was the master of her domain. She had a dressing room filled with the armor of a modern woman, the Versace gowns, the power suits, the revenge dress. But even this sanctuary had its limits. As her fame grew to messianic proportions, the palace became less of a home and more of a fishbowl. The paparazzi were permanently camped outside. She began to dream of life elsewhere. America, maybe France, somewhere the walls weren't made of gold and scrutiny. She was planning a future where she could just be Diana. Park House gave her innocence, Althorp gave her lineage, Highgrove gave her struggle, and Kensington Palace gave her a voice. In the end, Diana's journey was really a search for home. It was a search for a space where she could be loved for who she was, not for what she represented. She spent her life moving from one grand structure to another, trying to find a room that felt like it belonged to her. When she died in 1997, the physical homes she inhabited were emptied of her presence, but they became instant shrines. The golden gates of Kensington Palace became a weeping wall for the world, covered in a sea of flowers that stretched as far as the eye could see. The island at Althorp became a place of pilgrimage. The silence of Highgrove became absolute. Perhaps the tragedy is that she never found the perfect forever home in her lifetime. She was always in transition, always passing through. Or perhaps her legacy is that she transcended the need for one. She broke out of the palaces, she broke out of the estates, she broke out of the television screens. By opening the doors to her vulnerability, she built a different kind of residence, one not made of stone or brick or marble, but of memory. In the end, she resides in the collective heart of a generation. And that is a home that can never be sold, never be renovated, and never be taken away. That is a home that lasts forever.